Okay, so now all of our ingredients are clean, or all of our tools are clean and dry. Today we are making red, orange, more rubber stars. So this uses 0.3 potassium chlorate, 0.3 magnesium, 0.2 calcium, 0.15 parlon, and 0.05 red gum. So as with all of our star recipes, the first thing is that we've got to measure out and mix. Zero that out. Put our bowl on there. Zero that out. So the first is 2.4 ounces potassium perchlorate, 2.4 ounces of magnesium. And if the amounts look different, that's because density is very much a thing. We've got calcium carbonate. There's a really common name for that, but we're being specific here. A lot of parlon, because this is only 1.2 ounces of parlon. But ounce is a weight measurement in this case, so we're using weight ounces, not liquid ounces. And then just a little 0.4 ounces of red gum. Checking our scale, we are getting 8.04 ounces. This is supposed to be an 8-ounce batch, so we are well within our margin of error. Fresh, clean popsicle stick. Give everything a quick mix up. And you'll notice that the potassium perchlorate was actually, pretty chunky. There's a couple of them. Especially whenever we first put it in there. So we will fix that whenever we take the screen. So this is our 20 mesh screen. I generally just mix with a 20 over a piece of wax paper. Get all of our contents out of the bowl. And now I just use my spoon. You can see these big chunks of potassium perchlorate, but they're fairly soft and they break really easy. So just scrape everything through the screen. See all those little smears of white? That's where the potassium perchlorate's pretty chunky. Now you can put that in a coffee mill, a coffee grinder, if you have one that is dedicated to fireworks. The advice there would be make sure that if you use either an oxidizer or a fuel in that coffee grinder, that it is dedicated only to oxidizers or fuel from then on. Because if you grind a coffee grinder, even if you clean it really well, and then you put the other one in there, it can still spark and it can still cause a reaction. Because remember, you need a spark to set off a fuel, but once you have an oxidizer and a fuel, you only need heat. And coffee grinders get pretty hot actually, normally. All electric motors get surprisingly hot. So you can see that there was actually quite a few chunks of, let's say a couple things. There might be actually some lumps of magnesium in there. And something I did that's kind of a quality of life thing is I actually spread a bead of glue from the screen to the quarter board, and that kind of helps stop stuff from getting stuck right up against it. It makes it a lot easier to scrape. So we've got our powder. Give it a little mix. Don't have to worry about doing it all at once, because we're going to do this step again. Try to get it more in the center. And already we've got a much more uniform color than we did before. Couple spots in there that are not quite right. So again, back into the screen it goes. No treasure here, unfortunately. You can see it looks pretty lumpy, but once you actually start to kind of mess with it, a lot of those lumps go away. Still seeing a bunch of those little white smears in there, so there's still quite a few chunks of the potassium in there. And you can see I'm making a gigantic mess. By rocking your spoon as you go side to side, you can help stop it from trying to spray up like that. You know, just me being lazy, I didn't. Mix, tap our screen back out. Don't want to lose anything just yet. Now we've got a fairly consistent color. Again, it looks kind of chunky though. And our third and final screen. That is fairly uniform. Not really seeing any big lumps, at least nothing that isn't breaking up pretty much immediately. And third screen, we're not going to dump back in there. Anything that was too big to go through the screen, we don't really want in our mix. A lot of these really small clumps though, whenever we pour our acetone in there, they will get dissolved. A lot of those white chunks could actually be the Parlon, even though the potassium perchlorate started out really thick. Parlon has a really bad habit of forming big clumps. So you can actually add that, because a lot of Parlon is not a fine powder. A lot of it is actually more of flakes. So, get our scale, turn it back on, change our unit, and then we will zero out. So, just like before, we're making an 8-ounce batch, which means that we need about 1.75 ounces of acetone. One of these days, I will remember to hold this damn thing flat, and I won't end up wearing it. Nice and slowly. Trying to stop, let the scale catch up. At about 1.5. That is 1.72. Now it says 1.74. I will call that enough. We can, and now it's changed its mind, because of course it did. I will call that good enough though. And so we'll take clean popsicle stick. I mostly use the spoon for dry ingredients, but the obviously it's a little better for grinding on the screen because I don't get bits of wood in it in my mix. And just mix it a little. The popsicle sticks are pretty good for the wet ingredients, because whenever you do get wet ingredients, then you can actually just, get a new popsicle stick, rather than try to clean off the spoon every single damn time. Or between dry chemicals, you can just wipe it off when you're measuring, because pouring from the bag is generally considered a bad move. Okay, so that looks pretty good actually. So now we go to our gloves, put them back on. Gloves are on. Now we can touch our star compound and knead it a little bit. Now, as far as the acetone goes, we really only want enough to wet our composition. It really doesn't need to be exactly 1 3/4 ounce. Partially just because, you know, this is the step where if it's not turning into a ball of putty, then, you know, add a little bit more if it's really grainy. If you work it and it's a little bit too thin for what you're trying to do, then you can always just let this sit for a little bit, put a fan over it, and that will help evaporate a lot of the acetone out of there. Especially if you're like the last batch and you're really wet. I mean, you see it worked, it just really wasn't pretty. So we're kind of looking for the consistency of like a bread dough. And by kneading it quite a bit, the heat from your hands, you do actually thicken it up quite a bit. Acetone boils at, you know, room temperature, or it'll boil off at room temperature. So by kneading it in your hands and working it, you're putting more energy into it. You're causing that acetone to dissolve faster, essentially. You just see, I'm not doing really anything fancy, but we are getting a nice, consistent color. There's no random dots in there. There's no lumps, really. It's nice and fairly smooth, actually. Little holes, but I think that's because I think this off-gasses whenever you hit it with the acetone. So as before, throw this down. Try to press it out just a little bit. Should have gotten another piece of wax paper. You know, no time like the present. Roll out. So this is a very, very precise, exact distance of whatever I felt like, if I'm honest. So now we have 2 dowels, 3/16 in diameter, something in millimeters. And we're not even really gonna touch the sticks on the first one. We're just gonna kind of walk it out. The closer to a circle it is, the easier it is to work with. So, come this way. Now I am actually pressing it down to the sticks. And again, you know, I had to get quarter board to be able to make my screens. I had to buy the dowels specifically for this. So I just prefer to use the quarter board. It's got a nice round surface so I can rock it a little. You get good grip. So you may use something else. You may use an actual dowel and then you can actually roll it as you go. But I like this well enough. And I would want a pretty big dowel that I really wouldn't have any use for afterwards. But again, you do not want a sparking material here. Wood's okay, plastic's okay. Whatever the hell you really feel like. So, I feel like that's a pretty consistent 3/16 all the way through. So the first thing we will do is we will peel off our top layer. And that is much drier than my first batch of that red stuff. That's been a while since I've done this. So first thing is we've got our hot prime container. My very, very fancy with our bag of silica in there. And you can just take a big heaping teaspoon of this. Try to coat it everywhere because really we want it to be a little wetter than we need, but not by a whole lot. Just because any of that extra moisture is kind of going to get absorbed in this step here. Get me a little bit more. Work it around the edge. So part of the reason for priming this now is this is like adding flour to your bread dough. And like I said, it is pretty well the consistency of bread dough. So whenever we work with it, you know, we put it through the screen, it's not gonna stick anywhere near as bad. The other really good reason is that whenever we flip this, then, or after we flip it and we put it through the screen, then we're going to end up, yep. Yeah, once we flip it, we're gonna end up with it on our screen. And as long as there is hot prime between the screen and the star composition, it will actually take some of that thick layer and it will actually push it in between the stars. So we'll get a pretty consistent color and we'll have a hot prime on all sides. Where here I can only coat really 2 out of 4 sides of it. And that's not quite as thick as the other side, but I think we have plenty of hot prime on there. So now obviously, cover our container back. We do not want sparks or anything else to get in here. We don't want to spill it because this would be a really, really bad spill. So now we've got our star comp. Take our 3-mesh screen, and by the way, you can buy these from Starlighter and they look like this. They're pre-made. They are a little bit more expensive, especially the shipping. So, you can slide your hand under your star comp here, put your screen on it, and flip over. And you'll notice all of that hot prime we still have. Remove our wax paper there. All of that extra hot prime we put on there is now sitting on our wax paper. So after we push our stars through, they're immediately going to kind of coat themselves. And if you do a stupid and want to center it a little bit, then you can ruin all of your hard rolling work, and here we go. So you start, I know I kind of went straight to the roller last time. That works, but really you want to go around the outside and press it down into that screen, because that does kind of lock it in there. It stops it from running away on you. Kind of through the middle here. And this takes pretty good pressure. I am using the heel of my hand. So you need your screen to be very well mounted. Now this is the point. You can see again, I'm kind of covered in it. Little bit of extra hot prime in there. And this cleaned up pretty well. That I could hit with acetone, but I don't know what this is made out of, and the alcohol doesn't bother it. To be fair with that though, the alcohol hasn't bothered it, and this is already wet with acetone, so it's entirely possible that it won't actually make a difference. And so I am kind of pressing a little bit harder to my left here, and you're just kind of trying to expose that whole wire. Then I walk it over to the right, walk back over what I done, come back this way. And you see that by going against my my wires, it creates a little vibration that does actually help us knock these loose. So now, take my dedicated rag, my firework rag. Only ever gets used for fireworks. Use that kind of, it's real cheap. It's a Walmart, rag, so it does pretty well at knocking everything loose. My big problem is I don't take enough patience with it. Really, you should go like square by square and do it to make sure you get all of it worked through. And I just don't have that kind of patience. Patient man sometimes. Not about wiping shit down with a rag. Get our inside real quick. By getting our inside, everything that didn't quite fall but did get pushed through, we're able to remove. it gets too dirty, then one of these days I will actually be bothered to take like some acetone to it. However, cleaning the screens is fun. Throw your pin for good luck. It's not a good episode unless you throw something. Take note, I guess. These look much nicer and closer to what I wanted. I realize the black glove with the black star really doesn't work that well. So now we get our priming bowl dedicated to just this. Pour everything back in here. And we swirl around. So I see a ton of black powder still in here, that's our hot prime, and you can see they are actually starting to take the corners off a little bit. So now we will take our denatured alcohol, give them a good spray down, and stir again. Still quite a bit of powder in the bottom. I'll get them a little wetter. Now we've picked up most of the powder. You can see that these are actually starting to form pretty nice balls, actually. So now we can take our black powder prime, also sealed in safe container. Very, very scientific, actually. Heaping tablespoon of that. These are glistening just a little bit, and I don't know if you can really tell, but hopefully you can see the difference in what they look like before the powder goes on and after. So get quite a bit in there where I think it'll work. You can always add more or later. And already you can see a ton of black dust in there again. So we can always add a little bit more alcohol here. If they look kind of wet, you can always add more prime. If they don't take all of the powder, you can always add more alcohol. One tried to run for it. You can see I would say it's kind of 50-50. You've got a couple of them that are glistening pretty bright. You have some that are, it looks like there's a little bit of powder there. I will add just a pinch more of our prime because, this is my exercise in insanity. A little too much powder. Oh, well, I better add a little bit more alcohol. Oh, a little bit more alcohol. I better add a little bit more. As the kids say, let him cook. I feel like I would be an expert with a wok at this point. I think we're pretty well done with the gloves. So always make sure that you take them off in a way that you don't actually touch the glove. That stuff is hot. There's alcohol, there is acetone. We do not want to touch it. So it still has a little bit of a shine to it, which is perfect. Remember, a little bit extra alcohol will just boil off here in a minute. a little bit too much black powder, and then we're going to be pouring black powder into our dry box. So pick up my screen. Everything's pretty good and separated. I believe this screen is actually made out of 20 mesh, if I remember right. So these did last time I had to use the hairbrush, the dedicated hairbrush, because they were sticking together pretty badly. I really think they were entirely too wet, because I feel like I used a lot more prime and they were still sticking the whole time. These I think are much better. They're not really sticking, they're all kind of individuals. There's a bunch of those smaller grains, which I imagine was probably from me tearing the shit out of half of it, trying to move it. Because, yeah, it turns out it has the structural stability of a wet noodle. Who'd have possibly guessed? You know, a goo or a putty, if you will. And so now we have reasonably round, not perfectly round, screen slice stars. These will go in the dryer, and then it will be all of our orangey red done. Okay, and so we have our red orange back from the dryer. Put out some wax paper. These ones actually did a lot better job of not sticking together, which is kind of nice. Like I said, I think that last batch was just a little bit too wet. So, you know, it really didn't quite work. And then you can see we still have a bunch of the little granules, which if we end up making another batch, we can actually just throw those in there. I actually like to take the different sizes and just throw all of them into the star shell, because then you get, you know, sparks that kind of burn at a different, like, length, which I think looks pretty good. And so we have a little bit of a previous batch still left. So again, we open our bag. It's easier to turn the lid of the bag out, and that way it'll sit. And there's another 8 ounces of our red-orange stars done. All seem to be pretty well broken apart. None are seeming to clump. And so that's that batch. So now, as far as cleaning goes, put a set of gloves back on. So for cleaning, I'll just take a paper towel. I like to fold it into quarters. And you take our bowl, spray it with a little bit of the denatured alcohol, and just wipe it. And you can see this actually cleans up way easier than the red did. And the bowl wasn't, like, you could still see through the bowl. It wasn't completely just coated like the red was. Again, I'm not really sure what happened there. But you can see kind of that reddish orange color that the stars are gonna make. As far as my priming bowl, it looks like all it has is the primes left in it, so I don't actually see a need to clean that. I'll go ahead and wipe down my scale a little bit. It gets dirty occasionally, but because it's an electronic, I wouldn't spray it directly. So remember, this and our craft paper that's got all of our kind of extra star comp on it, these are gonna go into the hot trash to be burned later. It's not something you can just throw away. Because being hot trash, if there's anything in the garbage truck that catches fire, this is, highly flammable. Trash trucks are only made for household trash. So technically you're not even really supposed to throw batteries away, but this is one of those things like, yeah. What is it? A new trash truck costs like $500,000, and that's really not something I can afford in this lifetime. A little tough spot. Hit that with a little more alcohol. And they do make wall roll, or this is literally just a wallpaper roller. It works pretty well. They make them where they don't have these things on the side, and in all honesty, I might actually take them off. Just cause it looks cool, but it doesn't really seem to do much, and it does make it noticeably harder to clean. So I might actually just take these extra rollers off. Dirty up my bowl that I just cleaned. And then that will go into the hot trash, along with the gloves and the craft paper. So, that's going to be all for this one. And, hell, I don't know what I'm doing next.